We have the fifth in the sermon series, Understanding the Bible, and we're looking at the wisdom writings this week. If you wanted to understand about God, you might choose to study some philosophy or doctrine or ethics, or maybe even some science or mathematics. In that way, you could encounter and understand God. That would be a very, what they say, a left-sided brain approach. It would be rational, and it would be reasonable, and it would be sort of an intellectual. But if you wanted to understand God, you might listen to the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. You might just gaze at a great painting. You might just cut into a fresh pineapple and take a slice and put it on your tongue. Or for some of us, take a sip of a fine malt whiskey. And that would be a different approach. It would be what's sometimes called a sort of a right-sided brain approach. It would be intuitive and experiential. Now, those books that we've looked at in the Bible so far, we've looked at creation, we've looked at the early narratives, we've looked at the books of the law, we've looked at the histories. Now, that approach is more rational. It's more a left brain approach. It's much more analytical. But the wisdom writings, Psalms and Job and Song of Songs and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, these are a different approach. They're a right brain approach. They are a much more intuitive, much more experiential. And we need both to understand God. We need to understand God in our head and in our heart as well. And because of that, these books are sort of in the Bible to balance, to create that balance in what we have in the Bible from a sort of a rational, an approach primarily through the mind and an approach through the heart. So when we read these books, we have to think of them as we would, a piece of music. When you listen to a piece of music, okay, if you're a musician yourself, you might be sort of analysing at the back of your mind a bit, but primarily it's not an analytical approach. You just open yourself to the music and let it affect you. Exactly the same way with, a glass of wine. If you were a professional wine taster, you would be doing a bit of analysis probably, but mostly you'd just be enjoying it, just letting the flavours happen. The same with a painting. You can analyse it a bit, but mostly you just want to look and let it affect you. So when we come to these wisdom writings, rather than, primarily approaching them with an analytical mind, we need just to read them and let them happen to us and see what our reaction is. Let God in this way, if you like, the back door, some people say, in through the intuition into our heart. So let's quickly visit these different books. Psalms, of course, is, well, first of all, it's worship. It's not there to be read and studied. It's the hymn book for the Jewish people. These are there to be entered into, shared, and experienced through worship. Also, they were all set to music. Imagine you have a favourite song, I hope you do, and you're talking to somebody and you mention this favourite song, and they said, I don't think I've ever heard that. Well, you might know some of the lyrics, and you might say to them, the lyrics are whatever, but you know that that's not a song. They need the music, don't they, to experience it. And the sad thing of the book of Psalms, beautiful as the words are, we're only getting half the composition. It would be fantastic if we, experienced the music as well, and then entered in through worship. Because it's worship, it's about experience. It's about an experience of encountering God inside. But whereas our own hymns tend to be written from a very sort of positive point of view, praise the Lord, praise my soul, the King of Heaven, just really positive, wonderful feeling, ransomed, healed, restored, forgiven, who like me his praise should sing. You're coming from a very positive point, and almost all our hymns are that. But the psalms written through the Jewish culture are very different. They're very mixed. Some of them are written from a very low place, not a positive place, but a negative place. People who are going through darkness and doubt and suffering. And yet it's still worship, but worship coming from, out of an agony of feeling sometimes. And the psalm, may or may not connect with you, because as it is like song, like poetry, your hymn won't be my favourite hymn, your favourite poem won't be mine, or the favourite line that you have of a poem won't be the same as mine. So it all depends what connects with us. Psalm 42, which I used earlier in our worship at Dudleston, is written from a very kind of down perspective, the soul being cast down and longing for God. And one of the images you have in that psalm is that the psalmist remembers a walk in the mountains and remembers encountering God, watching the amazing waterfalls plunging into the gorges on the side of Mount Hermon. And the psalmist says, deep calls to deep in the thunder of your waters. All your waves and your storms have gone over me. And if you let it inside, you feel that experience of being absolutely overwhelmed by the power of God. But it may be that, it doesn't work for you. It doesn't get inside. It doesn't open up. It may be that you can't relate to that. And that's fine. But that's how the Psalms work. Some bits will just enter into us and we'll suddenly be inside the experience, and we'll sense intuitively exactly what the psalmist is describing. And sometimes we won't. And sometimes there'll be a point of your life when, such and such a psalm will make no sense at all. And then maybe later on in your life you'll read it and it will come alive. Because that's how the wisdom writing works. That's how this kind of, intuitive, experiential thing happens. The book of Proverbs is quite different. It's these sort of pithy, wise sayings, and they're often witty, they're often delivered with humour. And I think the nearest thing in our culture is, I don't know if you've ever heard, there's one or two programmes on Radio 4 that sometimes we catch, and it's comedians talking about current affairs. And sometimes it's really funny, and then in the middle of laughing, you realise they've said something incredibly profound and wise, and it's sort of mixed with humour. And if you like, the book of Proverbs is a bit like the kind of, the stand-up comedy of the Old Testament, although you would need a very good comic, I think, to demonstrate, to cross the cultural gap. But, it's wisdom such as, don't call loudly across the street at 5 a.m. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Cohen. The sun is shining. It's lovely. Have a nice day. You might think you're blessing them, but they'll be cursing you. So this is the typical sort of the proverb, full of humour, full of ordinary events, full of things that we recognise. The Song of Songs is one of the books in the Bible that I've heard people say shouldn't be there. It should not be there. I mean, come on, it hardly mentions God at all. It's a love poem. It's talking about what's between a man and a woman, and it's a very sensual love poem. What on earth is it doing in the Bible? But of course, what it vitally reminds us is this covenant. You know, we come back and back in this sermon series to the idea of covenant as the idea which links the whole of the Old Testament together. And the covenant is this kind of deal between God and the people of Israel. And God's side of the bargain is to bless them and look after them and keep them safe. And Israel's side of the bargain is to keep the law if they can. But actually what the Song of Songs reminds us is that behind this covenant, it's all about a relationship. And actually, essentially, it's not a business relationship. It's about love. And so the Song of Songs, you know, love stronger than death. Love like a blazing furnace that all the rivers in the world will never quench. Love so valuable that if you offered the wealth of all the nations in exchange for it, you would be despised. We look at the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's very different again. Ecclesiastes is a kind of a rant, if you like. It's a kind of rant about the emptiness of life without God. And my best way of trying to understand it is to imagine that somebody's taken a copy of Hello magazine. And if you are a regular reader of Hello magazine, I have to apologise now. I've only ever opened it sort of once or twice. But it's one of these magazines that's just full of all the lives of the celebrities. And I can quite imagine the writer of Ecclesiastes, exactly the words that's written in the Bible being applied, you know, as he's turning the pages. Just ridiculous, empty, pointless. Don't you realise, you people, you are working your socks off, day in, day out. For what? To fill your life with trivial nonsense. None of this is worth anything. It's just empty, void, banality. So it's a really cheerful book, the book of Ecclesiastes. Perhaps one to say for Lent. Finally, the book of Job. Now, the book of Job starts off like a fairy tale. It's almost playful. So one day, the devil decides he's going to pay God a visit. So he finds his way up to the great throne room in heaven. And God sits on his throne and he notices, moving behind the pillars, there's Satan with his forked tail sticking out. And he says, "Good of you to grace us with your presence, Lucifer. What have you been up to?" "Well," says the devil, "you know, bit of this, bit of that. I've been walking up and down on the earth, looking at those people that you put down there, seeing if any of them were going to do any good, or if they were just all up to mischief." "Okay," says God. "Have you noticed my servant Job? He's always doing good." "Oh, well, Job, he would be, wouldn't he? I mean, you've given him a charmed life. He's bound to be sucking up to you, God, isn't he? But if you let me give him a poke, before long, he'll be cursing you to his face." "Do you think so?" says God. And so the story goes on. And Job is really a book addressing one question, one vital question. When suffering comes to the earth, does it come as a punishment from God? Is it God's way of justly punishing people for their sins? Or could it be that people are innocently suffering? People who haven't deserved it go through pain and grief. But if God is allowing that to happen, where's the justice in it? How can he be a God of justice if he is allowing that? And this whole question is approached by story, through the story of Job, through debate, if you read it, between the characters, and in a kind of epic poem. So these 5 books that we call wisdom writing, they're all very different from each other, but all of them have a very different, as I said, a right brain approach, this experience. We need to experience them and see how we react to them, let them happen to us. So I'm going to finish by just giving you a couple of short opportunities to experience a bit of wisdom writing. I'm going to use a bit of Psalm 84, and then I'm going to finish with a bit of Song of Songs. And you might like just to close your eyes and listen. And because, as I said, this is creative writing, I'm going to try and help it with a little bit of music. So I will be having a kind of a backing of a bit of music as I try and use the words in the Psalms and the Song of Songs. If you want to close your eyes and settle, and we'll begin the first one from Psalm 84. How lovely. How lovely is thy dwelling place, O God, Lord of hosts. My soul yearns for your courts. My whole body sings for joy to the living God. Even the sparrow has found a home, the swallow a place to lay her young. But my home is with the singers who stand at thy altars, forever praising God. One day in your presence, one moment, is better than 1,000 anywhere else. I would rather be the lowest servant in your house, O Lord, than to be king forever in a land of my own, but apart from you. Blessed is the one who has heard your prayer. Blessed is the one who has set their hearts on the highway to Zion. And finally, a few words from the Song of Songs, chapter 2. Arise, my love. Arise, my fair one, and come with me. For behold, the long, long winter is past. The rains are over and gone. Flowers appear upon the earth. The season of singing has come. The fig tree puts forth its early fruit. The blossoming vines spread their fragrance. And the sound of the turtle dove is heard again in our land. farewell.